So, what exactly do you mean when you say, what do you mean?
I do not understand this. This really confuses me.
What's that supposed to mean?
Literally.
What's that supposed to mean?
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know what you're talking about.
What are you talking about?
What's that supposed to mean?
Cultural anthropologist Ujwal R. Kalgood and Motive Base president Jason Partridge will tell you that perception and meaning are the primary pressure points that shape and create the world we live in.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word.
Let's explore why meaning matters.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Now, here's your host, Aaron Trafford.
Hey, back with you for another episode of Why Meaning Matters. And I'm just called to, let's just dig right in. Sustainable, natural, non-chemical, made from natural source material. Like, what does that even mean? And more importantly, why does it matter? Welcome back into the show. So happy to have you here with us. And we're just hanging out here in the podcast studio with my friends Ujwal and Jason. And they're the brains, by the way, behind Motive Base. And we have had a couple of really great conversations today about what this means to be sustainable, natural, and how modern day marketing has fabricated some meanings around these terms that we don't all agree on. So last show in particular, we talked about this notion of sustainability, how it's informing our actions, how it's informing our buying habits, it's creating emotional resonance and our cultural understanding of what it means to quote unquote go green. But here's the thing. I was sitting at the breakfast table with my kids this morning and I was doing something incredibly old school. It was a very old school moment. I was combing her hair and I was spraying her hair with detangler and she was sitting there kind of whining about it. And as she was whining about it, she was reading the back of the cereal box, which feels like something of very 80s moment. But I noticed the detangler I was using on her hair said no toxic chemicals, all natural fragrance. And then the cereal box she was reading said 100% natural source fiber. And I was like, I knew we were going to talk about this today. And I was like, what does this all even mean? Does this even mean anything that I'm spraying her hair with no toxic chemicals? Like what? Ujwal, I don't know.
Yeah.
You tell me.
Yeah, I mean, in the last episode, we talked about this notion of symbolic capital. And I feel like this is a good extension of that conversation because when we have a lot of conversations with companies about sustainability and natural related initiatives, and one of the things we always explain to them is that in the consumer's mind, there's this thing that we call a cultural requirement. And what we mean by that is one thing must go hand in hand with the other. So for example, if you have a cleaning product that is full of chemicals and you suddenly make it sustainable somehow, great packaging, maybe the chemicals itself are sustainably sourced, whatever, the consumer isn't gaining any tangible benefit from it, neither are they gaining any symbolic capital from it. And you are sitting there going, but I made my product more sustainable. Why am I not selling more? Or why am I not getting better margins off of it? And that's because in the consumer's mind, they're cultural requirements, and cultural requirements come based on the meanings we associate with things. And so the meanings around natural, imagine it a Venn diagram. Meanings around natural and the meanings around sustainable, they intersect a lot. And the two must go hand in hand. And in particular, they go hand in hand for certain types of categories. And you mentioned two of them, Aaron, personal care and personal hygiene, and then food. And even cleaning comes into that equation as well. A lot of our work is studying meaning so we can help people understand these cultural requirements. They're not always logical, but that's what is exciting, or that's what's fun about human beings.
So Jason, somewhere in the back of my mind, when I bought the cereal and the detangler, was I actually making a values choice?
I think, well, it depends on the cereal. But I think so, because I think that, what's really interesting is that it's almost kind of like we peel an onion and then we put it all back together again. And let's take cereal as that example. you are looking and you want to basically kind of make the child happy in what you're purchasing. It's why I'm looking up in my cupboard right now and I can see Lucky Charms that are sitting there. They give my child so much joy. It makes me feel like a good dad because I make him happy. Now, at the same time, I'm also looking up and I'm seeing a box of Cheerios, and I'm looking at the fact that that's what we generally give them, because at the end of the day, that makes me feel like a good dad because I'm being a little bit better in the cereal choice. It doesn't have the marshmallows in it. The reality is that, in all of these situations, we're making choices and we're basically kind of taking something and choosing, does it fit this situation now? And what do I need to do moving forward in order to compensate for that choice? So the Lucky Charms are fine for this morning because at the end of the day, the value that I was really trying to bring to the table is that, we're back to school. I want him to feel good. I want to show him that I love him with this special little treat. Later on today, when he gets home from school and he's going to want a snack, we're not going to have Lucky Charms because we're going to try and do something healthy. So we're going to have that with some fruit. At the end of the day, there's this kind of this yin and yang, this kind of back and forth, this kind of job that we have in order to think about what does the thing do for us? And from a value standpoint, does it align with how I'm trying to kind of do the math in my head?
Mm-hmm. Ujwal, is that what we're getting at here? Like the requirement that by making a values judgment to be sustainable or natural, we're also then doing a good thing?
Yeah, 100%. And, there are certain cultural requirements that are stronger than others, and it depends from, one category space to the other. I think what's powerful for us is to figure out, like, I think I used this example earlier in one of our episodes. There's a cleaning company that decided their value proposition was going to be to ship people concentrates and allow them to mix in water on their own, right? Instead of going to market and saying, hey, we're a sustainable cleaning product, they said, stop paying for water. It's the same result, it's the same sustainable benefit, but the hook wasn't, hey, here's a sustainable product. The hook was stop paying for water. And that was a very clear, tangible benefit in the mind of the consumer. And it was a very clear articulation where there was less confusion about what the sustainable benefit is. The same applies to the natural universe as well, right? Because natural, if you again search the term natural, the meanings are less defined than if you specifically search the term natural in the context of a particular type of food. Then the meanings are more defined. Consumers have specific expectations on the types of ingredients they want to see, the types of sugars they don't want to see, the types of, they don't want to see palm oil in there, all that stuff. The requirements change, the cultural requirements change as you change the context. And that's what's fascinating about this, is that as you change the context and make it more and more nuanced and more specific, their cultural requirements become more specific because people have more agreement on the meanings behind these things. And when we get to those specific meanings, we create for ourselves a blueprint where we know exactly what we need to do, what benefit we need to deliver, and what we can expect in return.
So at what point does it make more sense the palm oil example is a great one. And we've had conversations also about the concept of genetically modified food having a meaning and a myth around that whole notion. But at what point does it make sense to use the language of this as a positive benefit versus the language that this is lacking something? So this doesn't have additives versus this is going to save you from buying water. Like, where's what's more powerful, taking something out or putting something in? Do you know what I mean?
It's a fantastic question. The funny thing is, what we're finding is both are equally powerful right now.
Okay.
Not having something is just as powerful as having something. I'll give you a great example. In one of the projects we were recently doing, we were studying, cleaning products, in particular dish soaps. And one of the things we found is the use of the word virgin plastic, right? And I didn't know this as a consumer myself. It wasn't until the research was done that we realized consumers are actually discussing the sustainability benefits, the pros and cons of virgin plastics. Because on one hand, a virgin plastic is actually more sustainable to make the very first time. But the problem is you're using virgin plastic as opposed to using something recycled or post-consumer recycled, right? So there's a pro and a con to it, and there's a debate and there's questions being asked about what's better. So that could mean, on one hand, a new label that says made without virgin plastics. And in that case, the without label is just as powerful as saying, hey, made with post-consumer recycled materials or made with recycled plastic. And so in that situation, the question we're actually asking is, why should we pick one versus the other, and what benefit and what meanings will it imply in the marketplace? And they're different. So that's what's fascinating about this, is that in the context of dish soap, for example, you will actually engage more people by saying it doesn't have virgin plastic than by saying, hey, it's recyclable.
This is fascinating to me, like absolutely fascinating, because I have been, and here's the other thing, is that whose job is it then to educate us on all of these nuances? Because something that I've done over the course of COVID, and I think that you would probably call me out for trying to build social capital like mega, but is that we went almost zero waste in our bathroom. And I made a very concerted effort to invest in products that don't create a whole bunch of plastic recyclables. And one thing I learned is that when I start buying, for example, a body scrub in a glass jar, that if I don't then refill that jar and I recycle it, that causes a whole different ripple effect that didn't have the intended meaning that I wanted by buying the glass. Glass takes forever to decompose. It doesn't decompose. So unless I recycle it properly and all this stuff, or reuse it, I've kind of defeated the whole purpose. Which, whose job is it to educate us about these sustainability, what it means to have something in the product versus not have something in the product?
I think that education is just a huge opportunity in the corporate world, because at the end of the day, there is initiatives that we're seeing across a whole bunch of our clients where sustainability is really important. They know that, they need people to buy their stuff. So they know that they need to be doing things that are going to keep people around longer. I mean, there's the logic in the equation, and there's the simple math that takes place. So, whether it's their responsibility, I think is something that we could really, really debate. I think that there's a question in and around kind of the choices that we're making as a collective, but there's a huge opportunity when it comes to these companies in being at the forefront of really kind of understanding and driving change. The key to it is really understanding kind of where culture is going and where they should be making the right inroads that link back to kind of what that corporation or that brand stands for. Because there's no sense in swimming against the tide. There's no sense in trying to be that kind of that square peg in the circle or that circle in the square peg. There's an opportunity to, as Ujwal said, look at the debate, understand the debate, decode the debate, and then figure out where is the path of least resistance in making the strongest connection with the consumers that really care about the brand.
So I want to pick up on that idea of not swimming against the tide, and it's a critical one because, you asked the question about whose job is it to educate. There's actually very little control we have about how education and meaning spreads in culture about issues like natural, issues like sustainable. There's actually very little control. So the spaces where we do have control, we got to take those opportunities. We started in the early episodes talking about how new ideas develop from myth and they slowly transpire into becoming actual stories, truths in culture. A lot of what we're trying to do is figuring out when something is in the myth stage, how much impact can we really truly have on it? And that's when you can have some amount of impact, but ultimately it's a democracy in a way, right? People decide what they want to believe, and there's not much we can do about that. So that's why part of it is we cannot swim against the tide. We can tweak where the tide potentially takes us. We can't swim against it.
Fascinating. So fascinating. So at the end of this, I feel hopeful, though, that there's enough shifting happening with this conversation around sustainability that maybe the best meaning will win.
Let's hope so.
Right? A little bit like Hunger Games. Okay, well, let's
Exactly.
leave it here for this episode, guys. I'm looking forward to picking this up again in episode 10. This is Why Meaning Matters. And if you have a comment for us or you'd like to drop us a note, please feel free to do so at hello@storystudionetwork.com. And make sure you're subscribing and following along on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode.
Thanks for listening to Why Meaning Matters with Ujwal R. Colgood, Jason Partridge, and your host, Aaron Trafford.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Why Meaning Matters is produced for Motive Base and the Story Studio Network by Eye Contact Productions.